The morning sun cast long shadows across the wheat fields of New Kansas as Jake Morrison walked between the golden stalks. His weathered hands checked each plant with the practiced eye of someone who had spent years working the land. The grain was almost ready for harvest, and Jake smiled as he thought about the good crop this season would bring. To anyone watching from above, Jake looked exactly like what he was supposed to be, a simple farmer tending his crops on a quiet colony world at the edge of human space. His clothes were dusty from field work, his boots caked with honest dirt, and his face showed the tan lines of someone who spent most days under the open sky. But Jake Morrison was not just a farmer. 3 star systems away, Admiral Kethvar of the Zerion Empire stood before a massive holographic display, showing the human colonies along the contested border. His scaled skin gleamed under the harsh lights of the war room, and his 4 eyes focused on one particular world marked in the database as Terra 7. "Tell me about this human settlement," Kethvar said to his intelligence officer. The younger Zerion brought up detailed scans of New Kansas. "Agricultural colony, sir. Population 50,000 humans spread across 57 farming communities. They grow grain crops and raise livestock for export to other human worlds. No military installations detected." Kethvar studied the orbital photographs. Neat rows of crops stretched across vast plains, with small towns dotting the landscape like islands in a sea of green and gold. Primitive transportation routes connected the settlements, and the largest structure on the entire planet appeared to be a grain storage facility. "Defensive capabilities?" the Admiral asked. "Minimal, sir. Standard civilian shields around the towns, mostly for weather protection. No orbital defenses, no military vessels in system. Our intelligence reports indicate they have a small security force for dealing with wildlife and the occasional civil dispute." The Admiral's mandibles clicked together in what passed for a smile among his species. The humans had been expanding too aggressively into space that rightfully belonged to the Zerion Empire. This remote farming world would serve as the perfect example of what happened to those who crossed imperial borders without permission. "Prepare the 3rd Fleet for immediate deployment," Kethvar ordered. "We will remind these farmers that there are consequences for trespassing in Zerion space." Back on New Kansas, Jake finished his inspection of the wheat and walked toward his farmhouse. The building looked like thousands of others across human agricultural worlds: simple construction, solar collectors on the roof, and a small barn nearby for equipment storage. But as Jake approached his front door, he touched a hidden sensor that scanned his palm print. The door opened to reveal an interior that would have surprised any casual observer. While the front rooms maintained the appearance of a modest farmer's home, complete with family photographs and well-worn furniture, the back half of the house contained equipment that had no business being on an agricultural colony. Jake sat down at a communications console that looked like it belonged on a military starship. Multiple screens showed data streams from across the planet, and sophisticated sensors tracked everything from atmospheric conditions to deep space monitoring. He activated the secure channel and spoke into the microphone. "This is harvest control to all field stations. Daily crop report, please." Across New Kansas, similar messages were being received in what appeared to be ordinary farm buildings. Linda Barnes, who taught at the local school, responded from her classroom while her students worked quietly at their desks. "Field Station 7 reporting normal growth patterns. All seedlings are developing on schedule." Pete Williams, the town mechanic, answered from beneath the hood of a farmer's truck. "Field Station 12 reports equipment maintenance is proceeding normally. All machinery is operating within acceptable parameters." To any outside observer, these would have sounded like routine agricultural communications. But Jake and his team were not discussing crops or farm equipment. They were military personnel using carefully coded language to report on the status of the most sophisticated defensive installation humanity had ever constructed. 3 days later, the Zerion 3rd Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the New Kansas system. 59 warships arranged themselves in standard bombardment formation, their weapons powered down but ready to unleash devastating firepower on the unsuspecting farmers below. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the tactical display show their target world spinning peacefully in the distance. Long-range sensors confirmed what their intelligence had reported. No military vessels, no orbital defenses, just a quiet agricultural world going about its daily business. "Sir," his sensor operator reported, "we're detecting normal civilian traffic. Agricultural transports moving between settlements, some atmospheric shuttles, nothing that poses any threat to the fleet. The Admiral nodded with satisfaction. The humans would learn that the Xerian Empire was not to be trifled with. A few orbital bombardments would eliminate their major population centers and serve as a clear message to other human colonies about respecting imperial boundaries. On New Kansas, the arrival of the Xerian fleet had not gone unnoticed. Deep space sensors hidden throughout the system had been tracking the approaching warships for hours, and now Jake Morrison stood in what appeared to be his grain storage barn, but was actually the command center for the planet's defense network. Fleet composition analysis complete, reported Linda Barnes from her position at the tactical console. She had changed from her teacher's dress into military fatigues, and her pleasant classroom demeanor had been replaced by the focused intensity of a professional soldier. Jake studied the incoming data. 59 ships total. 12 dreadnoughts, 47 heavy cruisers, standard Xerion bombardment formation. They're following attack pattern Delta 7, exactly as our simulations predicted. Pete Williams looked up from his engineering station where multiple screens showed the status of systems hidden beneath every farm on the planet. All field positions report ready status. Power distribution is optimal. Camouflage fields are holding steady. The Xerian fleet continued its approach, unaware that every move they made was being tracked and analyzed by the very farmers they intended to destroy. The orbital bombardment that Admiral Kethvar planned would serve as a demonstration of imperial power, but the demonstration he was about to receive would be far different from what he expected. Jake opened a communication channel to every hidden position across New Kansas. Military personnel who had spent months disguised as farmers, teachers, mechanics, and shopkeepers prepared for the mission they had trained for during 2 years of careful preparation. All stations. This is harvest control, Jake said calmly. Looks like it's time to bring in the crops. The Xerion Third Fleet moved through space with the confidence of predators approaching helpless prey. Admiral Kethvar stood on his command bridge watching the blue-green world of New Kansas grow larger on the main viewing screen. 3 light hours had seemed like a safe distance to begin their approach, well beyond the range of any primitive planetary defenses the humans might possess. His tactical officer updated the fleet's status as they closed the distance to their target. All ships report ready for bombardment operations, sir. Weapon systems are charging and will reach full power in 16 hours. Current approach vector will place us in optimal firing position for maximum surface coverage. Kethvar nodded his approval. The Third Fleet represented the finest warships the Xerian Empire could field. Each of his 12 dreadnoughts carried enough firepower to level a continent, while his 47 heavy cruisers could eliminate entire cities with single volleys. Against an undefended agricultural world, it would be like using a plasma cannon to kill insects. The Admiral's 4 eyes focused on the tactical display showing the planet's surface. Orbital scans revealed exactly what their intelligence reports had promised. Vast fields of grain stretching across rolling plains, small farming communities connected by primitive roads, and peaceful settlements that showed no signs of military preparation. The largest energy signature on the entire planet came from what appeared to be a grain processing facility. Sir, I'm detecting some unusual readings from the planet's surface, Lieutenant Zexnal reported from the sensor station. His voice carried a note of uncertainty that made several bridge officers turn to look at him. Admiral Kethvar's expression showed mild annoyance at the interruption. Define unusual, Lieutenant. The young officer studied his instruments more carefully before responding. Multiple energy sources scattered across the continental landmasses. The readings are consistent with fusion reactors, but they seem more powerful than typical civilian power plants. Agricultural machinery, the Admiral dismissed without hesitation. These human farmers use advanced fusion technology to power their equipment. Their tractors and harvesters require significant energy to work such large areas efficiently. Several other bridge officers nodded in agreement. Human agricultural technology was known throughout the galaxy for its efficiency and power requirements. The energy readings were probably nothing more than farming equipment preparing for the harvest season. But Lieutenant Zexnal continued to study his sensor data with growing concern. The energy patterns he was detecting seemed too organized, too precisely distributed across the planet's surface to be random farming equipment. The power sources formed geometric patterns that looked almost like defensive positions, but that was impossible on an undefended agricultural world. On New Kansas, the approaching Xerian fleet was being tracked by sensors far more sophisticated than anything Admiral Kethvar could imagine. Deep beneath what appeared to be Jake Morrison's grain storage barn, the true command center for the planet's defense network hummed with quiet activity. Jake stood before a three-dimensional tactical display that showed every ship in the Xerian fleet as glowing red dots moving steadily toward their world. The display also showed something the Xerians could not see: 732 hidden defensive positions scattered across the planet's surface, each one camouflaged to look like ordinary farm buildings. Time to weapons range? Jake asked his tactical officer. Captain Linda Barnes consulted her calculations. 14 hours at their current approach speed. They're maintaining standard bombardment formation, which means they plan to establish a stable orbit before beginning their attack. Jake nodded grimly. The Xerians were following their military doctrine exactly as predicted. Their formation was designed to maximize firepower against planetary targets while maintaining safe distances between ships. It was an effective strategy against most worlds, but it had one critical weakness. It required the attacking fleet to bunch together in predictable patterns. Chief Engineer Pete Williams looked up from his console where multiple displays showed the status of every hidden installation. Across New Kansas, all field positions report nominal power levels. The camouflage systems are operating perfectly. Their sensors are reading our particle beam artillery as grain silos and livestock shelters. The irony was not lost on any of them. The Xerians were looking directly at one of the most sophisticated military installations humanity had ever built, and all they saw was a peaceful farming community. Every barn contained enough firepower to destroy a heavy cruiser. Every grain silo was actually a hardened weapons, emplacement capable of tracking and engaging multiple targets simultaneously. Jake walked to another console where communication channels connected him to defensive positions across the planet. To maintain their cover, his people had continued their daily routines as farmers, teachers, mechanics, and shopkeepers. But now it was time to prepare for what they had trained for during 2 years of careful planning. All stations, this is Harvest Control. Jake spoke into the secure channel. Enemy fleet is maintaining predicted approach vector. Estimate 14 hours to contact. Begin pre-harvest preparations. Across New Kansas, men and women who had spent months disguised as civilians began making their final preparations. The schoolteacher Linda Barnes dismissed her students early and activated hidden weapon systems beneath the playground. The mechanic Pete Williams powered up defensive computers that had been concealed inside automotive repair equipment. The local doctor began medical preparations for potential casualties, while simultaneously checking targeting systems hidden in the hospital basement. To any outside observer, the planet appeared to be going about its normal daily routine. Farmers continued tending their crops, children played in schoolyards, and small transport vehicles moved along rural roads carrying what looked like agricultural supplies. The Xerian fleet's sensors detected no change in the planet's energy patterns or activity levels. Admiral Kethvar allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as he reviewed the bombardment plan. His fleet would establish orbit, demonstrate their superior firepower by destroying several major population centers, and then demand the immediate evacuation of all humans from Xerian space. It would be quick, efficient, and serve as a clear message to other human colonies about the consequences of territorial expansion. The Admiral had no way of knowing that every move his fleet made was being analyzed and predicted by the very people he intended to terrorize. The farmers of New Kansas had spent 2 years studying Xerian military tactics, preparing for exactly this type of attack, and building defenses that would turn the Empire's own doctrine against them. As the distance between the fleet and the planet continued to shrink, both sides prepared for what was coming. The Xerians prepared for a routine demonstration of Imperial power against helpless civilians. The humans prepared to teach the galaxy's greatest military empire that appearances could be very deceiving indeed. The Xerian Third Fleet reached bombardment range exactly when Admiral Kethvar's calculations had predicted. 59 warships arranged themselves in perfect formation around New Kansas, their massive hulls blotting out stars as they prepared to demonstrate the Empire's power to the human farmers below. Admiral Kethvar stood on his command bridge and felt the satisfaction of a predator about to strike. His fleet had traveled across 3 star systems to reach this moment, and now the defenseless agricultural world lay before them like a ripe fruit ready to be plucked. The orbital bombardment would be swift and decisive, leaving no doubt about Xerion's superiority. All ships report ready for bombardment operations, his tactical officer announced. Targeting computers have identified the major population centers. We can eliminate their primary settlements with the first salvo. The admiral studied the tactical display showing their targets. The human settlements appeared even more primitive from close range, with simple buildings and unpaved roads connecting farming communities that seemed to exist in a state of peaceful ignorance about what was about to happen to them. Not a single defensive installation could be detected anywhere on the planet's surface. "Sir, I'm still reading those unusual energy patterns," Lieutenant Zexnall reported from his sensor station. His voice carried more concern than before, though he seemed unsure why the readings bothered him so much. Admiral Kethvar glanced at the sensor data with growing impatience. "Lieutenant, we have discussed this already. The humans use powerful fusion reactors for their agricultural equipment. There is nothing unusual about energy sources on a farming world." But Zexnall continued studying his instruments with growing unease. The energy patterns were too regular, too precisely positioned across the planet's surface. They formed geometric shapes that reminded him of military defensive positions, though that was clearly impossible on an undefended agricultural colony. "Sir, the energy distribution seems very organized," he said carefully, "almost like the humans have arranged their farming equipment in defensive formations." The admiral's 4 eyes fixed on the young officer with cold disapproval. "Lieutenant, you are seeing patterns that do not exist. Farmers arrange their equipment for efficiency, not military purposes. Now focus on your assigned duties." Several kilometers below the Xerion fleet, the truth about New Kansas was finally ready to be revealed. In the command center hidden beneath Jake Morrison's grain storage facility, every screen showed green status lights as the planet's defensive systems reached full operational capacity. Jake stood before the main tactical display, watching the red dots representing Xerion warships position themselves, exactly where 2 years of planning had predicted they would be. The enemy fleet was following their standard bombardment doctrine perfectly, which meant they were moving directly into the most sophisticated military trap humanity had ever constructed. All defensive positions report ready status. Captain Linda Barnes announced from her tactical station. 732 particle beam artillery installations are online and locked onto their targets. Chief Engineer Pete Williams nodded from his console. Power distribution is optimal. Shield generators are at full capacity. All camouflage systems are holding steady. Jake activated the communication channel that connected him to every hidden position across New Kansas. Military personnel who had spent months disguised as farmers and shopkeepers, now prepared to reveal their true nature to an enemy that had no idea what was about to hit them. "All stations, this is harvest control," Jake said calmly. "Scarecrows are in position. The crops are ready for harvest." Across the planet, men and women who had been trained as soldiers but lived as civilians made their final preparations. Weapon systems that had been hidden beneath barns and grain silos powered up to full capacity. Targeting computers that had been disguised as farming, equipment began tracking the Xerion warships with deadly precision. The particle beam artillery installations were masterpieces of human military engineering. Each position could generate enough focused energy to punch through the heaviest armor the Xerion Empire could produce, and they had been positioned to create overlapping fields of fire that would allow multiple installations to target single enemy ships. But the most impressive aspect of the defensive network was its invisibility. Every weapons emplacement, every power generator, every command bunker had been built beneath structures that appeared to be ordinary farm buildings. The Xerions were looking directly at enough firepower to destroy their entire fleet, and all they could see were grain silos and livestock shelters. Admiral Kethvar checked the chronometer on his command console. The bombardment would begin in exactly 10 minutes, timed to coincide with the local sunrise on the planet below. The humans would wake up to find their peaceful farming communities under attack by the most powerful military force in the galaxy. "Begin final targeting sequence," he ordered his weapons officers. "I want precision strikes on their major population centers. Make it clear that we could have destroyed them completely, but chose to show restraint." The Admiral believed he was about to teach the humans an important lesson about respecting Xerion territorial claims. He had no way of knowing that he was about to receive a lesson himself about the dangers of underestimating human military capabilities. In the command center below, Jake Morrison made his final checks of the defensive network. 2 years of planning and preparation had led to this moment, and everything was ready. The Xerians had positioned their fleet exactly where human military strategists had predicted, creating the perfect opportunity to demonstrate that humanity's new rapid deployment doctrine was far more effective than anyone imagined. "Time to optimal firing position?" Jake asked. 3 minutes, Linda Barnes replied. "All targets are locked and confirmed." Jake nodded and opened a communication channel to the Xerian flagship. It was time to give Admiral Kethvar one final chance to reconsider his plans, though Jake doubted the alien commander would be wise enough to accept the offer. "Unknown Xerion fleet. This is Jake Morrison representing the colony of New Kansas," he said into the transmitter. "I think there might be some misunderstanding about what kind of world you're planning to attack." Admiral Kethvar stared at the communication display in surprise when the transmission from the planet's surface reached his flagship. The holographic image showed a human male standing in what appeared to be a simple agricultural storage building, wearing the plain work clothes of a farmer. "Put the transmission through to the main screen," the Admiral ordered his communications officer. He was curious to hear what this primitive farmer might say in the final minutes, before his world was reduced to smoking ruins. Jake Morrison appeared on the bridge's main viewing screen, his calm expression showing no sign of fear despite facing the most powerful military fleet in Xerion space. Behind him, the interior of what looked like a grain storage facility stretched into shadows, with farming equipment visible in the background. "Good afternoon," Jake said pleasantly. "I'm Jake Morrison, and I represent the farming communities of New Kansas. I wanted to contact you before there are any unfortunate misunderstandings about our situation here." Admiral Kethvar's mandibles clicked together in amusement. The human actually believed he could negotiate with the Third Fleet. "Human farmer, you are about to witness the power of the Xerion Empire. Your pathetic agricultural colony will serve as an example to all who dare expand into our territory without permission." Jake's expression remained perfectly calm. "I appreciate you taking the time to explain your position, Admiral. However, I think there has been a significant error in your intelligence reports about this world." An error? Kethvar was genuinely curious now. What could this simple farmer possibly know about Xerion intelligence operations? "Yes, sir," Jake replied with the same pleasant tone he might use to discuss crop prices. "You seem to believe that New Kansas is just a farming colony with no military defenses." The Admiral gestured toward his tactical displays, showing detailed scans of the planet below. "Our sensors have confirmed exactly that, human. We detect no orbital defenses, no military installations, no warships. You have nothing but primitive farming equipment and civilian shelters." Jake nodded thoughtfully. "Your sensors are very good, Admiral. They're detecting exactly what we wanted them to detect." Before Kethvar could ask what that meant, his sensor operator's voice cut through the bridge chatter with urgent alarm. "Sir, massive energy spikes across the planet's surface. I'm reading power levels that are impossible for agricultural equipment." The Admiral spun toward his sensor station. "Explain." Lieutenant Zexnal's voice shook as he read his instruments. "Over 700 high-energy signatures, sir. The power outputs are consistent with military-grade weapon systems. They appear to be located at every farming installation on the planet." Admiral Kethvar felt the first cold touch of real concern. "That's impossible. Our intelligence reports confirmed this was an undefended agricultural world." Jake Morrison's voice came from the communication screen with deadly calm. "Your intelligence reports were correct, Admiral. We really are farmers. We just happened to be farmers who used to work for Earth Military Command before we retired to this quiet colony world." The truth hit Admiral Kethvar like a physical blow. This was not a helpless farming community. This was a military installation disguised as an agricultural colony, staffed by human soldiers pretending to be civilian farmers. "You see, Admiral," Jake continued conversationally, "humanity has a new military doctrine called rapid deployment defense. Instead of building obvious military bases that enemies can see coming, we build hidden installations that look like something completely harmless." On his tactical display, Kethvar watched in growing horror as his sensor readings changed. What had appeared to be grain silos and farm buildings were now revealed as heavily armed defensive positions. The energy signatures showed particle beam weapons powerful enough to destroy his largest ships. "Impossible," he whispered. Jake heard him and smiled slightly. "Admiral, you're looking at 732 military installations, each one designed to look like a farm building. Every barn, every grain silo, every equipment shed on this planet contains enough firepower to destroy multiple starships." The Admiral's 4 eyes darted between his tactical displays and the communication screen. "Our scans showed agricultural equipment, fusion reactors for farm machinery." "Those were fusion reactors," Jake confirmed. "Military-grade fusion reactors powering military-grade weapon systems. We really do grow crops here, Admiral, but we also grow something else. We grow surprises for anyone foolish enough to attack what they think is a defenseless farming world, Admiral." Kethvar realized with mounting panic that his entire fleet was positioned exactly where the humans wanted them. The standard Xerion bombardment formation that had served the Empire well for centuries had become a death trap. His ships were bunched together in predictable patterns, perfect targets for coordinated defensive fire. "All ships, emergency evasive maneuvers," he shouted to his fleet commanders. "Break formation immediately," but it was already too late. Jake Morrison looked directly into the communication camera with the cold professional stare of a military commander who had spent decades planning for this exact moment. "Admiral, you have 30 seconds to order your fleet to withdraw from this system. If you do not, we will demonstrate why attacking human farming colonies is a very bad idea." The first wave of particle beam fire erupted from the surface of New Kansas, like deadly flowers blooming across the planet's continents. 732 weapons installations fired simultaneously, their beams invisible in space until they struck their targets with devastating precision. 12 Xerion heavy cruisers simply vanished. Their shields overloaded instantly, and their armored hulls vaporized before their crews even realized they were under attack. The remaining ships in the fleet watched in stunned horror as their companions disappeared in brief flashes of superheated metal and escaping atmosphere. "Impossible," Admiral Kethvar repeated, but the evidence was right there on his tactical display. 12 of his finest warships had been destroyed in the first 3 seconds of combat by farmers. Jake Morrison's voice came through the communication system with deadly calm. "Admiral, that was just a warning shot. You now have 46 ships remaining. Would you like us to continue the demonstration, or would you prefer to order an immediate withdrawal from human space?" The second wave of fire eliminated 15 more Xerion vessels before the Admiral could even process what was happening. In less than 2 minutes, the mighty Third Fleet had lost 27 ships to an enemy that was not supposed to exist. Admiral Kethvar stared at his tactical display in complete shock. His proud fleet was being systematically destroyed by farmers who had turned an entire planet into a weapons platform. The destruction of Admiral Kethvar's fleet continued with terrifying precision as the third wave of particle beam fire reached out from New Kansas. 8 more Xerion warships disappeared in brilliant flashes of light, their hulls torn apart by weapons that had been hidden beneath what looked like ordinary farm buildings. In the command center, buried beneath Jake Morrison's grain storage facility, the tactical display showed the systematic elimination of the Xerion Third Fleet with cold efficiency. Red dots representing enemy ships vanished one by one as the planet's defensive network demonstrated the deadly effectiveness of humanity's new military doctrine. Status report. Jake called out to his officers as he watched the battle unfold. Captain Linda Barnes consulted her tactical computer. 35 enemy vessels destroyed in the first 4 minutes of engagement. 19 ships attempting emergency withdrawal. 5 dreadnoughts still trying to return fire. Chief Engineer Pete Williams monitored the defensive systems from his engineering console, all weapon installations operating at optimal efficiency. "Power levels holding steady. We can maintain this rate of fire for another 15 minutes if necessary." Jake nodded grimly. 15 minutes would be more than enough time to finish what the Xerions had started. The enemy fleet was trapped in their own bombardment formation, unable to maneuver effectively while under coordinated fire from 732 hidden weapons positions. On the bridge of his flagship, Admiral Kethvar watched his military career disintegrate along with his ships. The Third Fleet had been the pride of the Xerion Empire, and now it was being destroyed by farmers who had somehow managed to hide the most sophisticated planetary defense system he had ever encountered. "Sir, the remaining dreadnoughts are requesting permission to retreat," his tactical officer reported with obvious panic in his voice. "All ships, Emergency withdrawal, Kethvar ordered. Maximum speed to hyperspace jump point. But the human weapons were too accurate and the Xerion formation was too tightly packed. Another wave of particle beams eliminated 3 more heavy cruisers, and one of the massive dreadnoughts before the surviving ships could begin their escape maneuvers. Jake Morrison's voice came through the communication system again, as calm as if he were discussing the weather. Admiral, I want to make sure you understand what just happened here. Your intelligence reports were completely accurate. New Kansas really is a farming colony populated by agricultural workers. Admiral Kethvar stared at the human's image on his screen. Then how do you explain weapons that can destroy our most heavily armored ships? Simple, Jake replied. Every farmer on this planet is a retired military veteran. We came here to live peaceful lives growing crops and raising livestock. But we brought our professional skills with us. When Earth Military Command asked us to test their new rapid deployment defense doctrine, we were happy to help. The 4th wave of fire from the planet's surface eliminated 2 more dreadnoughts and 5 heavy cruisers. The mighty Xerion Third Fleet now consisted of only 14 ships, most of them damaged and struggling to reach escape velocity. Jake continued his explanation with the same pleasant tone he had used throughout the encounter. The idea behind rapid deployment defense is very simple, Admiral. Instead of building obvious military bases that take years to construct and can be easily targeted, we build hidden installations that look like something completely harmless. Another salvo from New Kansas destroyed 3 more fleeing Xerion vessels. Admiral Kethvar realized with growing despair that his fleet was being systematically eliminated by an enemy that had appeared to be completely defenseless just minutes before. Every barn on this planet contains a particle beam artillery installation, Jake explained. Every grain silo houses a targeting computer linked to our planetary defense network. Every farmhouse basement contains military communications equipment. We really do grow wheat and corn, Admiral. But we also grow nasty surprises for anyone who attacks human colonies. The 5th wave of defensive fire reached out from New Kansas and eliminated 4 more Xerion ships. Only 7 vessels remained from the original fleet of 59, and all of them were racing toward the hyperspace jump point as fast as their damaged engines could carry them. In the command center, Jake Morrison watched the retreating enemy ships on his tactical display. The battle had lasted exactly 9 minutes and 17 seconds from the first shot to the final Xerion vessel jumping to hyperspace. The most powerful military fleet the Xerion Empire could field had been reduced to 7 barely functional ships by what they had believed was a defenseless farming colony. Cease fire, Jake ordered. Let the survivors escape. They have a story to tell. Captain Linda Barnes looked up from her tactical station. Sir, we could have destroyed all of them. Why let any ships escape? Jake smiled slightly. Because the whole point of this exercise was to send a message, Captain. We want the Xerion Empire to know that attacking human colonies is no longer a safe option. Those 7 ships will carry word back to their government about what happened here. Chief Engineer Pete Williams began shutting down the weapons systems that had been hidden beneath farms across the planet. All defensive positions report mission success. No casualties on our side. Total enemy losses, 52 ships destroyed. 7 retreated. Jake activated the planetary communication system to address all the hidden military personnel who had spent the past 2 years disguised as farmers, teachers, mechanics, and shopkeepers. All stations, this is harvest control. Mission accomplished. Resume normal agricultural operations. Across New Kansas, men and women who had just finished destroying one of the galaxy's most powerful military fleets began returning to their daily lives as farmers. Weapons installations powered down and disappeared beneath their camouflage systems, once again looking like innocent farm buildings. The planet that had just demonstrated humanity's deadliest military technology returned to the appearance of a peaceful agricultural colony. 6 months later, similar farming colonies began appearing throughout the contested border regions between human and alien space. The Xerion Empire never again attacked what appeared to be defenseless human settlements, having learned that when it came to humans, appearances were often very deceiving indeed. Jake Morrison returned to tending his wheat fields, secure in the knowledge that his quiet farming community had changed the balance of power in the galaxy. Sometimes the best defense was making your enemies believe you were just simple farmers until the moment you proved them very wrong.